Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. I have some worldwide Christmas and New Year cryptid sighting reports for you today. Now, if you're like myself and you don't really celebrate Christmas, or you're not really one for the holidays or going out and visiting the pubs, and you just fancy a natter, well, here's the place to be on Christmas Day. So, if you are on an iPhone, you will find a little link below that says chat. Click on that and you can access the chat box that's at the side of this live video. So first of all, I'm going to read out some recounts that I have pre-recorded for you, and I will be in the chatting along with you all as we go. So let's get started. Worldwide Christmas and New Year cryptid sightings. Now, as many people know, it tends to go quiet around about the time from November till January, February time. But there are very few and far between reports of creatures seen in snow-covered areas in the winter months. And we also have accounts of footprints that are found, because it's very easy to find footprints in a snowy substrate. So luckily, we do have some accounts from around this time. We have some from England, and I've brought some from Scotland and Ireland, and Canada and the USA for everybody to enjoy. So let's get going. The reddish-brown creature, Cockgrove, Nottingham, December 2015. Now, this is a sighting from England. Now, this sighting happened in Nottinghamshire, and most people out of the UK would think of Nottinghamshire and Sherwood Forest and Robin Hood. And this happened on the 27th of December at 2015, around about 1 a.m. And it's from a gentleman who was a designated driver. And he says, I was driving home, going along the Owthorpe Road, travelling back from a Christmas party, and I was heading towards the A46. As I was approaching one of the corners there, the one just before the Eton Park nursing home, when the headlights of my car highlighted something I am struggling to explain. And it was stood in the layby there. It was just standing there, and it was about 6 feet tall, and it was covered in reddish brown hair all over its body. My whole family saw it as they were with me in the car at the time. It had dark eyes and a human face. I don't want any help, but I felt that I should share what we saw in case there was a large cat on the loose or something. A large human-looking upright cat. This is the only thing I can think of to explain it. My son says it was not a cat. He described it as a monster. Little golden-haired maned men. Errington Woods, the 1st of January 2018. Trolls, boggarts, or small hairy folk. Errington Woods is in England, and it's in an area that's Newmark, it's called. And the witness says, Deborah, I came across your website while searching for some help to find an explanation for an incident that happened to me. I want to report something I saw on New Year's Day while I was walking my dog. I know you usually take reports of Bigfoots and Yetis, but I don't know how else to explain the things that I saw, or who to even go to report it. I guess you could call them Littlefoots, because I saw something in the woods that wasn't large, and they were short. 2 little, small, hairy human-type figures. Now, I regularly take my dogs walking in some woods near the village of Newmark. Now, these woods are called Errington Woods. And on New Year's Day, I was on my usual walk with the dogs when I heard these chattering noises. It sounded like 2 men muttering, and it sounded to me almost ape-like. 2 apes chattering away to each other. I looked in the trees where the direction of the sounds were coming from, and I came across these 2 little creatures. Both stood near a felled tree. They were about 3 feet tall and covered in tawny-coloured hair. They were both males, and I saw anatomy on one of them. They looked like small, primitive humans, and one was wearing what I can only assume was a loincloth. They each had a mane of hair down their necks, and they were very muscular. And I got the impression that they were not children or young. They were fully grown men. They were just two little men covered in golden tawny hair. They stared at me for a few seconds, and I got my mobile phone out. My black lab then started barking at them, and as I was loading the camera, they shot off into the bushes, and I had no chance to take a picture. And they soon disappeared, and I just lost sight of them. Red eyes in the night, Barnstable, England. Now, a sighting came in of a red-eyed creature that was reported in January of 2010. And it was in an area called Barnstable on the southwest coast of England. It was approximately 5:30 a.m. in the morning, so it was still dark out as we were still in the new year. I was driving and I was heading north on the A39 from Camberley to Barnstable. Now, that particular day, my partner was also in the car along with me, as he had an early appointment in the same town. There were no street lights down that road and no houses anywhere around, so it could be pretty eerie at the best of times. But this particular day, heading towards us on the other side of the road, was what looked like a set of red glowing eyes. They were moving as if they were on a dog that was walking fast. A dog that was just heading in our direction, if that makes sense. But there was no body or anything there. It was just these red eyes. And then they just disappeared. I thought I must have been seeing things as I was tired, but it spooked me. So I sped up a bit, and it was at that point that my partner said, "Did you see them?" I just said, "Yeah, don't talk about it." And I drove as fast as I could away from the area. In hindsight, we should have talked about it, but it was so scary. I really just wanted to forget all about it and just pretend that we'd never saw them. The Mulligar Wildman sighting, December 17, Ireland, 2017, that is, December 2017. I've been hiking since 2004 in many of Ireland's wild places, and I'm mostly alone when I hike. And I was in a remote and isolated area at the Sperry Mountain Range, and I'd walked to the 3 hilltops, which are surrounded by dense forest, and I was heading back uphill towards a tree line to get back to my car, when I saw something very tall and large moving faster behind me about 1 kilometre away. It was walking, heading on the hill towards me on the route that I'd just taken. Now, I'm not easily spooked, but I did not hang about, as I'm of the opinion that if it wanted to, it could have caught up with me quite easily. I have pondered this for a while now, but I have not got a clue as to what it was to this day. I see people on the hills and the mountains at various distances all the time, but this was taller than a 6-foot person at the distance that I saw it. It would have been 8 feet plus, is my guess. As I didn't have a gun, I only had hiking poles. I was not about to wait and find out. My hiking bag now has binoculars added to it. I would be interested to know if anyone has encountered anything strange in and around the Sperry Mountain area. Now, I have my walk recorded on GPS unit, and I walk all year in all weathers from good to zero visibility. And I'm well used to seeing everything appearing at you out of the mist. But on this walk, I had great visibility. And I know about the optical illusions and what lone trees can seem to be when walking. I don't know what I saw that day. I see deer and quad bikes on the mountains regular, along with hikers and dogs and runners, depending on where you walk. All I can say is this thing that I saw, for want of a better word, was out in the open, following a fence on a hill that I had just left in the same direction. And this thing was moving fast, and it was on 2 legs, and it was around 8 foot plus easily in height. I'm not one for seeing things, but this was huge, and it really spooked me at the time. I have sent a picture of my route, pardon me, and the approximate coordinates of the walk. One thing I did notice that stood out to me was that an unusual hunting party was there in the area, and they were well camouflaged. And I found it strange because they had maps of the area, and normally local hunters don't tend to carry a map and all that game. It just really stood out to me as strange, and it didn't look like they were hunting for game. I actually waited at my car when I got back to the car park for it coming over the top of Mulligatawny. And as I exited over the summit and I turned left heading west of my car, which was parked on a minor road, nothing appeared. Nothing came over the top. Strange screams, Loxonet, December 2017 in Scotland. I wanted to share my experience with you. Last Christmas, 2017, my family and I went to stay in the Scottish Highlands. We stayed at the side of Loxonet in a quite remote location. Behind our cottage was a game trail, and at night I would regularly see deer heading up the hill, which was inaccessible to your average human. There was also a waterfall and a stream at the side of this game trail. And we'd been there a few days, and on the 26th, Boxing Day, I went outside to have a cigarette. And it was just as darkness began to fall, and in Scotland we call that the gloaming, when I heard a really loud scream, which sounded like it came from the top of the trail. The only way that I can describe this scream is to say it sounded just like the recorded vocalizations that I have heard of Bigfoot. After we returned home, I decided to have a look on Google Earth. And up at the top of this trail is quite a lot of woodland. And I'm certain that the Highlands has Bigfoot living there. And I can't wait to go back. Another account from an area in Scotland is the witness to the Camberley Bigfoot, footprints in the snow. I'd like to report an experience I had a few years ago now. Never really told anybody about it because, talking about Bigfoot makes you a crazy person in some people's minds in the UK. But I just recently found out that there's been 2 other sightings near a quarry not too far from me, just outside of Camberley. And I live very near there, and I think the incidents may be related. It was during the winter of 2012 or 2013, which, if you recall, was very intense. In Camberley, the snow was at least a foot deep on flat ground and many, many feet in the snowdrifts. I was walking the family dog down on a dirt track that provides access to a stretch of farm plots, and it stretches between the main road through to a wooded area further on, and that stretches and just keeps going south. About a little further than halfway down the road, I saw what appeared to be an extremely large footprint in the snow. It was slightly softened by snowfall, but the print was clear enough to make out. You could see that it was a barefoot shape rather than a shoe or a boot shape print, and maybe 1.5 times the length of my boot. Now, this made it, in my judgment, a little longer than 1.5 foot. Judging by the way it was orientated, it seemed that whatever left it was walking from the field on one side, considering that the road was at this point maybe 4 feet across due to the snowdrift, and there was only one footprint on it. The creature that left it must have been quite large. I tried to see if there were any more footprints around, but I couldn't find any. And I think this may have been because the snow that would normally fall on the footprint was being blown into the drifts on either side of the path. So this print was slightly more protected as it was being snowed out less than the other footprints, and thus it remained clear while the others were hidden by falling snow. Now, as strange as this was, I deemed that it was probably nothing to worry about, and it could have been caused by any number of things, really. So I left it and I continued on. Once I reached the wooded area at the end of the road is when the scenario became very intense. For detail, the area has a lot of low, scrubby bushes, and with the added snow, these bushes were about 5 feet tall, coming up at least to my neck. Now, once me and the dog got to the wooded area, the dog reacted strangely. She seemed to have seen something before I did, and she began barking and lunging, similarly to the other Camberley report. Before I saw the creature, I heard it. A sort of deep, long "oh," which caused the dog to stop barking and start squeaking and whining in fright. Finally, just before I was about to turn and leave for the sake of the dog, and frankly for my own sake, I witnessed this great big creature rise from behind one of the bushes. It stood easily 3 heads over the top of that bush, and it seemed disproportionately wide at the shoulders and neck, and it was almost black in colour. The snow also seemed to glint off his eyes, making them pop out at me, stand out slightly more than, say, a regular human's would. Now, while the visibility was slightly damaged by the snow, this creature was only maybe 5 metres in front of me, and it still dwarfed me. It was at this point that the dog took off, and I took after it, and I didn't look back. Since then, I have tentatively returned to the road, but I haven't seen any trace of this creature. I generally don't buy into these sort of things, but I suppose something like this only needs to happen once to convince you. Regardless, I have never told this story, and I'm only now revealing it due to my discovery of the other witness. Now, perhaps there is something in this area that we haven't discovered yet. Now, the Camberley area has reports going back to the 80s and before that, actually, when a young girl named Charmaine Fraser saw a tall, dark, hairy creature on her grandparents' land when she was collecting the mail from the bottom of the farm track. Now, the dog that was walking along Charmaine had reacted first, which made her look into the direction the dog was barking, and she expected to see a fox or something like that. But what she saw, she described the creature as holding onto a branch of a tree, and it seemed to be examining the branch in some way. Now, there are also reports from the quarry area of very strange bone finds, an account of these long, deep howls in the valley below, a mystery humanoid shape seen in the headlights of a car just standing there in the road. Now, it's quite a forested area now, but back in the 70s, it was a much more mixed wood, you would say, like a really decent woodland. Now there's a lot of sicker foresting going on, so there's not a whole lot going on in the woods other than that. But if you're ever out in Camberley, you would see how out in the wilds you would put it. Now, you take that back to the 1970s and it was much more so. And it would have been a long walk down that track. And can you imagine what it must have been like for an 8-year-old girl to look up and be confronted with that, knowing that it's an awful way back up that drive before you're back at safety, or seeing it when you're in the car and the car lights hit it, and knowing that the adults around you are in the car just don't understand, and there's no point that you can say anything. I remember having a conversation with Charmaine when we first met each other, and we were basically ending each other's sentences because we were both young girls when it happened. And she said one of the scariest things of all, she remembers being at bed in a grandma's cottage, and there was lots of gravel outside, and she said she remembers something walking with very steady feet around that gravel, very close to her window. Now, if we reported that in Washington State or in Alberta or someplace that was vast and far between, you would instantly say Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Well, Camberley is our vast and wild place. So to be a small girl in a lone cottage way back then must have been absolutely terrifying. And like myself, Charmaine set out to find others, and she did find them. She found lots and lots and lots of them. And she's done a massive amount of research just trying to get validation not only for herself, but for all of the other Scottish witnesses. And it can be like that regardless of wherever, you live in the world, can't it? So now we go to Miller County in the USA, and it's called a fur-coated man. It was a cold and rainy day, and we were returning from a family get-together over the Christmas holidays. My wife and I were in the pickup, and my boys were riding in the back. They were in the bed of the truck, under the tarps in the sleeping bags. We'd left Ida about 8 and 9 at night, and we were headed north on Highway 71 to Texarkana, where we farm. Now, the road at some points isn't that wide, and I suddenly see this thing a ways off in the distance in the high beams of the truck, but I don't know what it is that I'm seeing. Now, the closer we got, the more strange the figure became, and I knocked on the window at the back to get the attention of my boys. My wife was asleep, but she woke up at that, and she sat up. And she looks out the window, and she sees the figure, and she says, "It's a man walking in a fur coat." It was very cold that night. And in the midst of no place, she thinks we should give this character a ride to town, it being Christmas and all. It wasn't long before we got close enough to realise that this was no man in a fur coat, and no way were we stopping to give whatever it was a ride. As we passed it, the man, or the thing, stopped walking, and it just stood there, dumb-like, staring into the headlights. It couldn't have been startled because we were coming up on it for quite a distance. It raised its arms up to shield the light from its eyes, and the arm and the hand were thick and hairy and muscular, and the big underside of the palm of the hand shone as pinkish and brown towards us in the light, and it pretty much blocked details of the face. Now the boy stood up and peered over the cab of the truck, and they went silent. My mouth fell open. What was this? It had shaggy hair, all brown as I recollect, and the hair was long over the face. The face seemed like a man's face, but what I could make out of it, it had hair and whiskers and short hair on the body. It had hair on the legs, but it had caked mud from the knees down, like it had been wading through the swamp or something. I remember it being quite tall. It was huge in the chest area, and as we passed this thing, it screamed and yelled like it was in pain, or maybe terror. A strange noise I have never heard before. My wife and I looked at one another, and the boy screamed in fear and dove under that tarp. I remember thinking the rest of the drive home, what was that thing? What was that thing? We didn't talk about it anymore that night, and if we did, I don't remember what was said. During milking the next day, the boys did ask what it was that we saw on the road that night, but I had no answer for them, and the subject was just dropped. I don't know what else to tell you about that screamer on the road. All I know, other than that it was hairy and good sized, was that it screamed. We're retired now, and we live near Blanchford, and there are rumours of a monster from years ago here, but nothing's been in the papers lately. If you have heard of something recent, we would like to hear from you. I hope this helps your research. Kindly, John Copeland. Now, a snowplow driver in Chelan County, Washington, has reported seeing a Sasquatch-like creature when he was clearing the snow. And as the driver was making his fourth pass over a section of highway he was working on, he saw what he believes to be a Sasquatch. It was walking on top of the train trestle, but it stopped and it turned at a slight angle to look right at the driver. as if it was startled by the sound of the blade scraping the road. Now, the highway generally runs east-west, but it turns at that section and it runs underneath the train trestle. So the driver was headed south at the time, and the trestle runs east-west over the road, like an overpass. But unlike an overpass, the trestle does not have any side walls or rails, and the train tunnel is east of the highway. Now, the subject was walking towards the tunnel. Now, a snowplow cab is up high above a large blade, so the driver has an elevated perspective, and as he approached the train trestle, he had a good close view of the subject, and as he drove his snowplow underneath the trestle. The driver stated, "I was working on a snowplow for the state of Washington at the time, and I was travelling eastbound on Highway 2 towards Leavenworth. I was approaching the train trestle, and my lights caught a large animal on the bridge. It was walking towards the train tunnel. I couldn't stop it, but it was clear that there was something there that wasn't there the previous 8 times I passed through the area." Now, the driver observed it distinctly for about 5 seconds in his headlights, which were bright enough to cast shadows. Now, he estimated that the height would be around 6 to 6.5 feet, 7 feet tall, somewhere in that region. It was double the width of a good-sized person, and it was slightly hunched over in its stance. He could see clumps of hair, so he described the subject as shaggy-haired. It was a dark, brownish, blackish colour with streaks within it, making it look similar to the way some people have their hair coloured. Now, the snowfall at that time was very light. Actually, it was just mister, the way it gets just before it stops. And the driver made another pass going in the opposite direction through that section about 10 minutes later, but the subject was no longer there. Now, the driver was shocked to see the subject, and he was glad to be inside the safety of his snowplow cab. He didn't want to check for footprints or possibly get out and go looking for anything, and he doesn't want to get another look. A creature observed stepping up and over a fir sapling, Canada. In December of 1998, about 5 p.m, I was driving westbound on Lake Earl Drive, approaching Highway 101 at the controlled intersection there. Because it had just finished snowing, my son was admiring a snow-covered area of the mountain that had just been clear-cut. So I'm looking up also, and I noticed a human-like figure at the top portion of this area. Now, the figure was walking down, and it appeared to be about 7 or 8 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown fur. Not believing what I was seeing until my son said, "Oh shit," and both of us continued to sit there and watch this critter. As it continued down the hill, it stepped up and over a large fir sapling, and it stopped, and it looked around, and it started walking again. A total of about 400 yards, and it disappeared into the forest at the base of the hill. Because both of us were in total shock, we didn't notice that 3 other cars had also pulled over to the side of the road to watch this animal until it walked out of sight. I first thought it was a bear, as they can get up on 2 legs sometimes. He was completely covered with hair except on his butt. It had no hair, and it looked like a monkey's butt. His palms had no hair also. It was about 8:30 in the evening, and I was rushing as I was late for a dinner party. The day was overcast and dark, but the Sasquatch was illuminated in my headlights. Now, that area is pine and fir, mixed interior sagebrush, and there is a river close by, and the terrain is steep in spots. Now, the witness thought the creature was 6 to 7 feet tall. Its entire body was covered in black hair that was about 2 to 3 inches in length, except for the palms of its hands and its buttock area. And it walked away from the road, but quickly turned to look at him as he drove by. Its steps were fluid and graceful, with its arms swinging wide. Its face was flat, with no visible sound. Tourists recount their viewing of a biped walking uphill in Alberta, Canada. Now, the tourists had travelled to Alberta to ski, and they stayed at a hotel that's located within an area that has a long and current history of Sasquatch-related reports. Now, the day of the report, they decided not to ski as the weather was too cold. It was approximately minus 28 Celsius, about minus 18 Fahrenheit. About 2 p.m, they took a short walk around the lodge, and they were headed back through the parking lot when they noticed something moving up the nearby hill. They found it odd that something would be out and about in such weather, so they decided to watch it for a while. They could not determine what it was, as it appeared to move bipedally up on 2 legs. Now, they decided it couldn't be a lone human, as it was far too large. It would be extremely unwise for a human to be outside and moving away from a shelter in such extreme weather. They watched it for about 20 minutes, at which point they had to move inside as it was cold. Now, the figure was completely black, and from what they could tell, it seemed larger than a human. They went back out and checked the hill again after warming up, but they could not see it anymore. Now, the direction that creature was going would take it over this rather large hill and into a valley on the other side. The witness stated, "My partner and I were walking near the Delta Hotel on a very cold January afternoon, early in the new year. In the distance, we could see a large figure moving up the side of a snow-covered mountain. The figure was dark and large, about the same size as the trees that we could see. It was walking upright and moving upwards at a steady pace. We watched it for more than half an hour as it wound its way to the top, and then it disappeared." So, what if you are out this weekend or over the Christmas holidays and you come across a creature? Now, I know we talk about it all the time on the podcasts and YouTube as if it's nothing. Oh, it's a creature seen in Canada, a creature seen in USA. But for once, let's put ourselves in the shoes of said witness, or pick any of the cases that we just talked about today. For example, the gentleman that they presumed was in a fur coat. So you're driving along, completely normal day. All you're probably thinking about is getting back home, getting the house warm. What can we leave till the morning? What do we have to do straight away? Hot drink, something to eat, and bed. So it's probably the only thing on your mind, in all honesty. Long journey, and you're probably quite fatigued. And you see something that you can't recognise up above you in the roadway. So you rub your eyes a little bit and it's still there, and you're getting closer and you still can't work out what it is. And you're thinking, is it a deer? Is it a dog? Is it a person? What is it? Can't work out what it is. And to your horror, as you get closer and closer, you realise it's something that you can't even describe, let alone name. So luckily, this gent had his family with him. So you got instant validation there. There's someone with you there. While this 7-foot hairy creature screams in your face as you pass it. So you go back home, and everybody thinks that the first thing you do is jump on to your laptop and make the report, and it isn't like that. You go over it and over it and over it in your head, and you ask yourself all the questions that the skeptics ask you. What was it? How did it get there? Where does it come from? What do they eat? Where do they live? Why are they here? Will I see it again? Does it know where I live? All of those questions go round your mind continuously, over and over again. As we spoke of Charmaine before, and the dog reacting and her looking up and being confronted with an impossible creature, too impossible to describe. not only to your friends and family, but anyone outside your family, school, teachers, doctors, anyone you talk to is not going to believe you. They're going to put you down as a fanciful child, as they did with me, you know, away with the fae, or, oh, she's full of imagination, and all those things. And you hear it so many times that you just shut down. But that doesn't make the incident go away. You always have it. It's always there. And as we talk to people across the world, we realise that it's exactly the same for them. They have all of these questions that most of us have. But can you imagine hearing the footsteps of something in the snow crunching behind you, but you can't see it, you can't make it out because there's no visibility? Or you're playing somewhere as a kid and you look up in the tree and there it is above you. Could drop down at any second and just take you. Without cognitive thought, the things that run through your mind are just unbelievable. If many of you parents, if you're a parent and your child is playing in somebody's house and they didn't bother to tell you, that sinking sick feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach where you think, oh, good God, somebody's got them. That's the kind of feeling, that's the nearest I can get it to. As if you think, oh, good God, I'm about to die. Oh, good God, he's about to get me. I thought he was going to grab me and pull me through that bush and do whatever he wanted to do to me. And I would just be either one of the missing or another body found in the park. And they just, they put it down to either a strange male or no suspicious circumstances or don't really know what happened kind of thing. Those are the thoughts that go through your head and it never goes away. But one of the things that we do, all of you out there do, by listening to these stories and accepting them, you give that witness a kind of validation. You give them an empowerment, a way to use their voice in an incredibly positive way and pass that positivity forward. So on this day, Christmas Day for everybody, I think my gift to you is thanks. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And thank you for taking the time to sit down and listen to the stories of these people. And to the people themselves, thank you for writing in, regardless where you report it to or who you report it to. There are people out there that will sit and will take you seriously and they will listen. And there are also people out there who will say, oh, I know, because that happened to me. And I think we all know that it's happening more and more and more. So I'm going to end the podcast for now. But if you're on the live feed and you're in the chat, stay there because I'm going to be back. I'm just going to put the fire on, get a cup of tea, and then I'll be back and we'll all have a natter. So I won't be saying goodbye on this one. I will say happy holidays and I will see you all next week. Back in a moment.